My screen is showing a black box with like a little spinny. Okay, well that's
Oh,
weird.
really?
Yeah.
Yeah. This is what it looks like.
Oh hell yeah. Okay, well that's correct. And then if I change this, it should automatically change to our faces, I think.
Yeah. So we are live.
Heck yeah. Okay, nice. Very nice. Then
Awesome.
let's get into
All
it.
right, we can just get right to it. All right, welcome everybody to our fireside chat number 2. Here, this is your host, Nee, as well as Chris, and we're going to be discussing a very fun topic for you guys today, which is it decentralized? So, what we mean by is it decentralized is a lot of times in the crypto space, decentralization is the main theme that they speak about and the main thing that we push within this space, but there's a lot of aspects that come to decentralization that many people are not very aware of. So today we're going to break down those aspects as well as go over common protocols that are out there, such as Bitcoin, Ethereum, and other projects, just to go over how decentralized these projects are and if they're fully decentralized. So yeah, without further ado, let's jump right into it. So Chris, what does decentralized mean in the context of blockchain and crypto, and why is this actually important?
Okay, so within the context of blockchain and crypto, at its base level, it means that the underlying blockchain system, that network essentially, is not hosted by a singular server or entity or person or anything like that. So you could have like an individual who hosts multiple servers that wouldn't qualify as decentralized, or you could have an entity that hosts multiple servers. I don't think that would qualify as decentralized either. What you're really looking for is a mechanism that allows anyone to become a host for that blockchain or a miner if we're talking within the context of like original crypto or like Bitcoin and such via the proof of work consensus algorithm or uh, mining algorithm so that we can have anybody, you or I, could just go and set up and start mining the crypto and validating the blockchain and providing a node inside that network, which creates a record and thus makes it very hard for someone to take over or do damage to that network. But then, even with Bitcoin, there are other elements of decentralization which are not covered perfectly at the moment, just because practically it's not feasible in a way that's still going to be accessible to people. So things like
Mhm.
uh, back when I first got engaged, there was a centralized forum that we would go and join, which was on a centralized host for a web application.
Mhm.
This is what a few protocols or projects in the crypto space are addressing. Like BNB has Greenfield as one of its projects to deal with this hosting, but ultimately, we haven't begun or made this transition yet. So we could pretty much take Bitcoin as like one of the gold standards for decentralization, but it's also had issues with like ASIC concentration. So because um, application specific integrated circuits or ASIC um, have taken over, like you don't really mine Bitcoin without ASICs anymore. Or at least I'm not aware of anyone doing that. Essentially, it's those who can acquire these computers, mostly through Bitmain or through another crypto mining provider, um, and deploy it and then host it. And it's become a situation where like there are a few very big players, and it is the most decentralized network still, but it isn't perfect. So yeah, I think that kind of covers what it means to be decentralized. You want to look at no singular point of failure. You want to have many different persons, many different entities, and you want
Mhm.
to address the entire stack. So there's like on the base system level, you download the Bitcoin mining software onto your computer, and bada bing, bada boom, you're in. Um, problem is if you don't have an ASIC, you're not really contributing to the network anymore in the same way that you used to. At least you're not being rewarded for doing so. The other ASIC integrated systems will be taking the mining rewards in most instances. And even then, with Bitcoin, you actually have pools as well. So you have servers that are aggregating all of that mining information or mining work uh, in order to win blocks and then distribute those blocks proportionally based on the compute. And you do have solo miners and things like this that are making an impact, and you also have like Lightning and a whole bunch of these other changes to the Bitcoin core. But Lightning is more of a centralizing force as well, unfortunately, because of how it's being set up. Or at least it was initially when it was first announced and for its initial deployment. It may have changed substantially. I haven't actually updated myself on Lightning in a while.
Mm.
So maybe that's different. I could be wrong, but it appeared to be a centralizing force at first, and I think it likely still is. Uh,
Okay.
yeah,
Interesting, interesting. So basically, in terms of like kind of the gist of it, in order for something to be decentralized in and of itself, it needs to have these multiple points. It needs to have that accessibility. It can't be completely concentrated to one point, whether that's a single entity that is controlling it, such as a business or a corporation, or a single person that is operating it with multiple nodes of their own. Okay,
yeah, I would
that's
say so.
that's interesting. That's interesting. So that kind of leads me to my next question. Do you think that decentralization is kind of like a spectrum? And how exactly do you think we would measure like how decentralized a protocol actually is?
It's a great question. Yeah, so I would say it is a spectrum, and I think it's not only like a spectrum, but like a dynamic one, where as we become more decentralized, we can see further as to what could be better in terms of decentralization. Like
Mm,
when we release a new decentralized progress point or marker or deliverable, all of a sudden we're like, it brings more attention to the things in the total usability or user experience stack that aren't that decentralized. Like a lot of us weren't worrying about like whether or not the website was decentralized, except for like I think the founder of Mega Upload had gone to the extreme of like the entire internet uh, needing to be a P2P interface that had no centralization points. But I don't think that is being deployed to my knowledge.
yeah, we can see how that could get very messy in and of itself, given if it's in a sense that would also be a very wild, wild west, given the fact that, everybody is kind of just doing whatever.
Yeah, yeah, and I think like we need to move towards decentralization. I think that's important for system redundancy because like right now there's like a handful of critical points in North America, which if like even one of them were to be harmed or interrupted, uh, it would be catastrophic for North America. I think like there's like 7 points or something like that, where if you were to take down all seven, like that's it. It's over for us. Like,
Hmm.
America goes down, Canada's hooped, Mexico's probably hooped. So
Hmm.
that's kind of scary. Like realistically, with what over 400 million people across those three countries that make up North America, it would be more reasonable to assume something like I don't know 40 million points of failure necessary for something to go down. So that wouldn't be like
Yeah.
perfectly decentralized because ideally you'd want every single person contributing to the network being rewarded for it, and thus also making sure like so long as we have half of the people out there staying honest and doing the right thing, we're chilling. And if you add in like other course correcting functions, like with Ethereum's update from proof of work to proof of stake, they introduced slashing. So bad actors get harmed. So it reduces the incentive and also makes it harder for a bad actor to like attack the network again because they'd have to put that capital together again, and it's increasingly harder and harder and harder and harder for them to do that. So I think that was a very smart um, way of addressing that beyond just incentives, actually providing like a penalty. Um,
Hmm.
so I've lost track of the question. I apologize.
Yeah,
Uh,
basically, if it's just a spectrum, and I kind of from what you explained there, yeah, it definitely is. Like there's a lot of aspects that need to be implemented, such as having these multiple nodes and spaces so that we can be able to operate fully decentralized. But at the same time, currently, because there's certain infrastructure things that need to be improved as well, we can't exactly go fully into decentralization because there needs to be points of trust that people can interact with to be able to make sure that no bad actors just take over the space.
yeah, I'd say, well, kind of. So I think decentralization is trustless, and yeah, people do need these points of trust, but that's mostly due to like there are some people who still don't think computers are a real thing and that the internet's a real thing. It's
Mm.
just like there are still some people who don't think blockchain is a real thing. They don't think AI is a real thing. Like Warren Buffett did not believe the internet was going to be a thing, and didn't invest in Google and many other large opportunities. Um, this is going to be part of the population. There's like an adoption curve that is followed, and part of that is capabilities, like merit. There are some people who just even today cannot operate a computer. Like they can't easily type. They don't know how to open their email. They don't know how to recognize that an application is this software layer on top of the hardware.
Mm.
There are these barriers that I think just take time for people to get used to. Because if you look at a kid and you put them on technology, they pick it all up very, very quickly. Uh,
Mm.
this pattern, I think, will probably continue. And therefore, if we have more decentralized systems that people are interacting with at a younger age, or from a younger age, then they'll become more seamless and more understood and more integrated. But there will always be a fraction of the population which just doesn't want decentralization, and some of them might be bad actors. I presume the vast majority of them to be bad actors.
Yeah.
'Cause
Yeah.
the only reason you don't want decentralization is you want to be able to manipulate things. Uh, because functionally it makes systems hardened, like it makes them better, through making it harder to take down, making it more redundant, reducing its risk vectors. So we should always be striving for more and more decentralization. But yeah, it's not gonna ever be a perfect thing. Like decentralization, just like perfection, is a moving target. As we take aim for it, we find out that it's moving further and further and further and further and further along. If we can make something perfectly decentralized today, tomorrow it will no longer be perfectly decentralized. We'll be like, oh, you know what? This element of centralization exists. Like maybe we get to the extreme of like, well, we only have servers within like our solar system. We need to go further than that. Like you can always kind of keep
Mm.
pushing. Super hyperbolic example, but the intent is to show like it will never be
Yeah.
perfect. You really just want to be like achieving at a reasonable standard. And like at this point, like the crypto markets have some projects which are achieving at a reasonable standard. There's a few projects who are achieving beyond a reasonable standard, and even in the crypto space, I'd say like half of them aren't even trying. Like the only decentralization on about half of these tokens is that they are on a blockchain that is decentralized. Like they're on Ethereum or they're on Solana, and therefore their decentralized mechanism or factor is purely that decentralization of the nodes on the network or the system that they're hosted on. Everything else about them is centralized, and even then, a chunk of them are centralized tokens on that system where they're like, oh no, we have control of the minting function as a single wallet holder, like the dev wallet or the owner wallet, uh, and we can mint and we can burn and we can freeze tokens and we can transfer tokens and all these other crazy things. Like just because something is a token doesn't even mean that it is actually to the limit of that blockchain's decentralization, because people can centralize again those tokens that
Mm.
are on that blockchain. Um, and then most of them are like still having centralized websites, right? Like this is changing slowly, but it's not there yet. It's still kind of a pain to build in a decentralized fashion. It's not normal. It's not even necessarily rewarded or encouraged by the market at the moment, but it should be. We should be encouraging and rewarding more decentralization. So like if you look at mm, let's say like MakerDAO, that's pretty decentralized. They're doing a
Mm.
really good job because even though they don't have a like a crazy decentralized custom blockchain solution or anything like that, like I'm talking like dealing with the miners and the servers and all that kind of stuff, they are present on a good like their primary blockchain is a decentralized blockchain or a fairly
Mm.
decentralized blockchain like Ethereum. And there are other chains that host their tokens, so they got like a multi-chain kind of approach, which then by using a multi-chain approach, you get the benefit of each decentralized network has all of its decentralized nodes, and when you're a protocol that integrates across all of those, you're actually expanding your decentralization. So you are
Mm.
becoming a hardened system. So I think that's pretty impressive and useful. And there are a few of these too. Like that, there are a lot of multi-chain protocols. I think my favorite one at the moment has to be the Thor chain protocol. Like,
Yeah,
I'm a big fan.
same for sure.
They're doing a
Yeah.
really good job trying to solve some very tough issues in decentralization. Um, and I think, yeah, we're going to probably continue to get more and more solutions as to what it is, but we got to actually want to do that. We actually have to be like choosing to do decentralized things. And from like a value point of view, as an investor, more decentralized things have a lower risk vector and a higher profit opportunity. So,
Yeah, given the fact that basically, by having things so spread out, like the ability for it to actually have stability is that much better. It becomes a more robust system completely. And then, yeah, it also gets to profit off of the merit-based system in and of itself, which allows people to then want to put in work into the protocol and want to put in work into these systems. Just like, how Binance began in the beginning, where it's
yes,
like they allowed people to have this contributor system and then they kind of grew and scaled from there, which was absolutely massive for their growth.
exactly. Like a lot of development is already kind of aligned towards this. Like if you go into GitHub and you look at these repo setups, in the right hand column, there's like a contributor section where you can see who's contributing to this thing. The more minds you have on it, you also get a benefit from like in economic theory, there's like this magical number where you can add people to production process and you get scaling up until a certain point theoretically because there's the gains per new person do not offset the complication of the interaction between those persons, which that complication causes losses of productivity. And I think everybody kind of intuitively or experientially has experience with this or knowledge of this because you're working at a small corporation or a small project and you kind of can do whatever you want. You can take on all the responsibilities. But at the end of the day, you are a single being with so many hours in a day, and there's only so much you can actually do. Even if you crunch
Mm.
like 70 hours straight and you're highly productive and all these other things, a team of 100 is going to be able to do more than you. They can be working a lot more casually. Uh,
Mm.
but we've also probably experienced, or some of us have experienced working at a very large corporation with many thousands of employees, and you can spend more time in a month talking about doing things than actually doing things. And people debate and politics get involved, and at the end of the day, the ability to actually be productive, the allowance to be productive in those systems is nearly non-existent. So like this is a huge issue in
Mm.
every corporation I've observed so far. Like I imagine there probably are corporations which do not have this pattern. I just haven't seen them. A lot of them want to say that they don't have these problems, but realistically, all that really means, practically speaking, in most instances, is that they are not as bad as the others. So, like Google and Binance and a bunch of these other companies create decentralized teams inside their centralized system to break up that problem, to address it as best they can. But ultimately, I think it's going to be an issue of the nature of that entity construction and how that works. Like you actually need in society businesses which have clear, direct leadership or essentially an authoritarian frame because you want this one person who understands this one problem really well and found that product market fit and dialed it in to be supreme leader for a while and to drive that forward because it's going to just be more efficient. It's going to work better.
Mm.
And once that is like kind of completed, then they can go do other things and they can decentralize their situation as best they can. But a corporation can never be decentralized. It's just not possible. Anytime you try to, you're going to have issues with regulators. They don't want decentralization because, from their perspective, they want to be able to point to someone and be like, "This is your fault. You did this." They need accountability, which is an important element of any system as well. Um, I think what we're doing is kind of cool with FiatRexa because by building a decentralized protocol where the entire contribution system is decentralized on purpose from the start and designed towards maximizing that, it allows for things to flow better. And like you saw this really nicely with Bitcoin and Ethereum and BNB all at the start. Like Ethereum and Bitcoin, very much so, but you could go into the forums and just be like, hey, I think I found a problem over here, and people are like, yeah, that's a great problem. Like, I think you're right. Do you want to solve it? Or someone else would be like, oh, yeah, that's a great problem. Here's my solution. And then other people are like, oh, I think there's a problem in your solution. Like, maybe if we try this. And all those minds coming together and focusing on a solution just provides us better outputs. And again, there's a magical number somewhere where too many minds are going to cause too much disagreement and too much chaos. But even in those situations, if you have different people publishing their own solutions, like Bitcoin forked, for instance, we got BTC, Lightning Bitcoin, or SegWit Bitcoin, and we got Bitcoin Cash. Two completely different standards from the original Bitcoin, but they were both improvements addressing an underlying future problem that different people had different approaches to. And they could do that because it's open source and it's a protocol. So they just forked it, implemented their solution, and the market decided which ones they wanted. There were some issues in there, some politics, unfortunately, because Bitcoin was beginning to get big enough at that point that key power brokers and players were engaged. So like the symbol on all the centralized exchanges was hijacked by one particular side of that beforehand. But we're not going to get into that. So I think, yeah, if we can have a protocol layer which is multi-chain in nature, and we can address decentralized contributions, so any single person can be like, hey, I want to fix this thing. They can. And then you can review it, like other contributors can review it and be like, hey, yeah, this was a great implementation. Fantastic. Thanks for your hard work. Protocol grants you tokens. Or reward, or in probably many cases, it's going to be like, your contribution is not viable, or even worse, your contribution is dangerous. This looks like you're a bad actor, actually. This looks not good. We're going to flag you. And with our basic filter on entry, because like you have to become a contributor, which means you have to have like a minimum number of contributor tokens, that provides a filtering mechanism where a person who is a bad actor essentially is out of pocket each time and can't do anything once they get flagged. So the risk reward ratio for bad actors inside these kinds of systems can be skewed really, really nicely to the benefit of good actors and to the detriment of bad actors. And
yeah, that
so
makes a lot of sense. And it just, that way, yeah, like you're saying, the good actors are able to actually push the needle so much forward. And we're seeing that with a lot of different systems that are out there. Like, I know a lot of people in general don't like to give praise to the open source Chinese model that is out there, but China is killing it
yeah,
with that open source model that they have, because so many people are able to just push the thing forward. And the thing that really differentiates one brand from another is truly the branding. Like, so many people have access to the same type of technology, the same types of products. So it's like, how can you differentiate yourself by, making yourself completely unique and cutting edge in front of the rest of the market, which means it's a greater benefit for the customers anyways, because they're always going to have the best of the best when they're going forward, which
100%.
that's what we should have in a common good protocol that is built to essentially help people.
100%. I think we need common good protocols across the board because there are a lot of things where, like, AI is a great example, blockchain is a great example, but like with AI, like functionally speaking, I don't think people have realized it just yet, but the best AI is going to be the one that gets the most good, clean data. And the best, good, clean data is going to be aggregated from the largest group of people who want to produce good, clean data. And if you incentivize them to do so, and you have a decentralized solution to it, and there are like a lot of clickbaity things in the crypto space right now, which are just wrappers and don't actually address the underlying issue. But you also have some really good and interesting projects, like Render, for instance, has pivoted very, very nicely to providing this hardware or infrastructure layer for potentially allowing decentralized compute. And there's a bunch of good white papers that have come out, not white papers, but scientific papers or technical papers that have come out, research papers. So there are better and better solutions towards making this decentralized solution more attainable, more practical. And as we move further and further towards that, like that is actually going to be what, like, no centralized AI solution can actually win. It is
Mhm.
the great equalizer, which I find very poetic and funny because we have all these big entities who are the creators, these big centralized entities who are the creators of the AI stuff, and I don't think they've realized that they can't win. Like, it's not
Mhm.
actually possible. Like, they can manipulate things, they can do regulatory capture, they can do they can be full on bad actors and do tons of horrible things, but at the end of the day, ultimately, the winner is going to be the decentralized solution because it's just going to have better data. And you're going to have more people contributing their little golden nuggets, and the compounding of that and the frequency of that across a billion people is going to be far greater than 1,000 to 10,000 people who have to operate within a rigid hierarchy. It's just not, they're not going to compete. They have no chance. Like, they can warp things for a while, but ultimately, the best AI solution is going to be through this decentralized mechanisms, or a set of decentralized mechanisms. So I think
Mhm.
if we can first, we need to kind of recognize that the idea of a common good is important. Like, that exists, and once you recognize that a common good is important, and by the very nature of a common good being something that everybody can access, it's for everybody's benefit. Like, oxygen is a common good in my mind.
Mhm.
But we also have like more advanced situations of common goods, like some of the first instances that I can remember learning about are like rivers. If you have like a river flowing through your property, you don't own that river. Person down from you benefits from that. It's a common good, and so on and
Mhm.
so forth, all the way down, all the way up, right? So damaging that thing is not great. Um, the problem is when it comes to common goods, is you get behavior, which some people argue against, but it's pretty clear if you go and you look into it that this behavior is true. You get the tragedy of the commons, which is when everybody benefits from something, who is going to be responsible for maintaining and taking care of it? And the intent was that governments would do this, but they don't, or they're very very bad at it. So governments need help, and corporations aren't designed to address common goods. So we need a solution to address common goods, especially coming into an era where it is imperative that more and more things are recognized as common goods and managed as common goods. But you also want to remove the human element because the human element having control over a common good fails. So you need a protocol which allows people to temporarily hold certain responsibilities, and those responsibilities need to be incentivized. And it needs to be this constant flow because you don't want anybody to become entrenched in the situation for many different reasons.
Mhm.
First, like, if the incentive is really high, the person's never going to want to leave, even if they're not doing a good job. So that's bad. But you kind of need a high incentive. It should be a high incentive because the value to society is very, very high. So you want people to like step into the role, do the best that they can, and then step out of the role. Like, essentially get forced out and you push somebody else into the role, and you're gonna have, like, I've seen this consistently as well. Like, some of the best leaders and the best people are people who initially didn't want to do the thing that they were very good at. Like, they had resistance because they understood the importance and the value of the thing that they were doing, the role they were filling. They essentially were like, "That's too hard. It's too much. I'm not going to do a good job." So they shy away from it. Whereas people who are have no interest in understanding the scope or the value of a certain role or the importance, they're just looking at their self-interest, are happy to jump into those roles and put themselves forwards for it. And they do inherently a shitty job because they don't even care to understand what the responsibilities and the scope of the responsibilities are. They just want to benefit themselves, and that's it. So if we can, through the use of a common good protocol, um, address the underlying issue of common goods, and starting with like simple things, like, one of my initial ideas or beliefs is that money is inherently now a common good, uh, because we believe, or I believe, that people deserve the right to eat food and have shelter and have water and have basic human needs. And the only way you can access those basic human needs now is through money. You must have money, and this is a global situation. Like, yes, you can find someone kind who's willing to donate the good, but they're still paying for it at the end of the day. And if you follow the path that we're on right now to making it so that money is a privilege and not a right, uh, that becomes exceedingly problematic because of the system that we've developed where money is the medium of all things. And on top of that, by its very nature, money is just a measure. Like, you can't deny someone the right to measure something. Like, I can't go to someone and be like, no, you're not allowed to count the distance between your driveway and your front door because you're bad. That's ludicrous and stupid. So why are we trying to implement such ideology with money, which is again just measuring? That's all it is. It's just a sum of measurement. The
Mm.
aggregate of subjective opinions of value, supply and demand. So we need to maintain measurements because if you can't measure things, you can't manage things. And if we allow things to go too further wonky with manipulations, um, we're going to be flying blind. And the longer we fly blind,
Yeah.
the less effective we're going to be.
Yeah, that makes sense. It makes sense. You can't measure, you can't manage, can't manage. Everything becomes chaos. It makes perfect sense. Yeah, so that kind of leads me to my next question, which we kind of touched on it a little bit. We were touching on a couple of different projects. I want to focus on, let's say, the main four that people tend to think about when they think about crypto right now. So, what we'll do is kind of like a game. We'll go, is it decentralized on a scale of 1 to 10? So, one being that shit's not decentralized whatsoever, 10 being this is the gold standard for decentralization. And so the different projects we're going to go through is we'll start off with Bitcoin, then we'll go to Ethereum, do BNB, and then last Solana, which has been doing and making waves. So starting off with BTC, is it decentralized on a scale of 1 to 10? What do you think?
I'd probably give Bitcoin like an 8.5 or a 9 because it's very decentralized in most standards, but it's just not entirely integrated on a full stack level. Like, if you were to go and implement a website for it that was also decentralized, like a forum or something like this, then it'd be in a much better position. Hang on 1 second. I had to pause for a second. Yo, I'm on a live recording right now. You just totally fucked me. Yeah, I just want to let you know. Uh, uh, okay, I'm just gonna have to go to post.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, so yeah, for Bitcoin, is it decentralized? It's got decentralized miners.
Your audio is muted.
Oh yeah, for Bitcoin, is it decentralized? It's got decentralized miners, so there are anybody can become a miner, and you can use any type of technology stack, which is super helpful. You just have to be you have to integrate with the blockchain and the other nodes on the blockchain. Uh,
Mm.
Anybody can open up a pool. Anybody can do all these other things. So there are a whole bunch of benefits that can be acquired uh, by kind of just trying to be decentralized. You also have I am so sorry for the interruptions. Give me 1 second.
No worries. And we'll be right back after this break.
People keep trying to get my attention. Uh, so yeah, so Bitcoin, you have the decentralized miners. Anybody can kind of like expand from, like, you can write your own miner. Like when we first started, people were mining on IC, like integrated circuits, and then someone wrote a mining kit for GPUs, and then eventually for FGAs, and then ASICs. So that's pretty good. Then we have the ability for people to actually participate in a competitive manner for the incentive, which that one has fallen off pretty hard on Bitcoin, where it's like there are a few providers of ASICs, and that makes up the bulk share of the compute in the network. And there are limited providers. So we have a concentration risk here where Bitmain really is the provider for the hardware. There are a few others, but at the end of the day, they're just not as economically beneficial. So what happens? People concentrate more capital into the leader because that gets them better ROI, and that further allows that leader to keep pushing ahead further and further and further because they have more capital to hire researchers and hire engineers and scientists and all these other things to better improve their situation. So that has become a concentration risk for Bitcoin. There's also the websites. If you go to the Bitcoin forums on a centralized host, through centralized registrars for the DNS system. We have like no real solutions to this at the moment that are fully integrated and effective. Um, like, yeah, you could use Tor for a website, but there are issues and vulnerabilities within that. It's not really meant for like general everyday use by people who are trying to just like support decentralized systems. So Bitcoin, I'd say, is ranked the highest. But yeah, there are some critical issues that need to be addressed, and I think are being addressed. Like again, moving target. We just keep moving forward.
Mm.
Uh,
Okay, awesome.
yeah, and then
Awesome, awesome. So then I
Ethereum.
guess next on our list would be Ethereum. But before we get into that, what I want to do is on your format, would you be able to, if you click your image, click like put it in a tile so that we're side by side?
Oh yeah, I can do that. I think.
Yeah, because like I'm looking on the stream, like you're really small. So we can get you so that you're more full screened.
Let me just see here how to do that. And I've never actually done
You
that
just click
before.
the three dots. Like
Yes.
if you go to,
Change
so
layout.
go back. I can see on your screen right now. So click the three dots that are right next to. If you hover over your picture,
Yeah,
then you would just click.
I see.
Yeah, there's like three dots, and then you can
I think that's better, right?
put it. Yeah. So now we can both see each other side by side, much clearer. Awesome, awesome. So yeah, let's get into the next one. Is it decentralized Ethereum on a scale of 1 to 10?
Probably give them a 7 right now.
Mhm.
Because the proof of stake mechanism, while being super great in regards to mitigating or essentially providing like a penalty to bad actors through slashing, also prevents a huge barrier to participating in mining or validating the network. Um, it does kind of address the underlying pool problem because you just stake with a validator. So a validator can open up and not have enough to be a validator, but people can lend their or uh, they can delegate their Ethereum to this validator and grant them enough to be an active validator.
Mm.
But ultimately, like Ethereum was doing really good by being ASIC resistant and sticking to just being GPU oriented, and that allowed their network to be much more decentralized. So if you go look at like the history, uh, Ethereum was growing rapidly when it was the most decentralized network because it was more decentralized than Bitcoin for a period of time because Bitcoin had just come into this ASIC era, and then Ethereum came out quickly as an ASIC resistant network, allowing anybody to just plug in a GPU and start mining and benefiting from supporting the network. And that was super accessible to anybody with graphic cards. It caused an issue with like if you were a gamer, you now had budget to buy extra graphic cards, and that meant other gamers didn't get graphic cards, which was a piss off if you weren't one of the people who were crypto engaged. And there was like, I think still
Yeah.
a lot of hate in the gamer community for crypto because of that phenomenon. Whereas like it was 2016, 17, 18, 19, it was like really hard to get uh, a gaming graphic card.
Yeah. Even during COVID, like the GPUs were so backed up, like because a lot of people were also trying to build their own PCs as well. They saw this as maybe something they wanted to tap into. Like it was kind of like a GPU gold rush. Everybody was just after it.
Yes, exactly. It was like it literally was a GPU. I'm pretty sure there were headlines stating exactly that it was a GPU gold rush, and like Nvidia shareholders were getting mad because like you're making too much money from this crypto bullshit. But
Mm.
I mean, it doesn't. It's still the compute was being used efficiently and effectively.
Mm.
Which again, there's like a whole bunch of uh, dishonest press and media, unfortunately. So they talk about like the environmental impact, and they don't recognize that like all the most sustainable energy solutions are supported by and enabled by mining of blockchain stuff, like supporting blockchain networks, mining of tokens. So as it's like a very ignorant and negative understanding of Bitcoin, but again, like or blockchain, but that's like people are learning, right? And people learn very slowly. And there is unfortunately a lot of disinformation and misinformation out there. So people can get infected by that stuff, and it just sends them down the wrong path, and it can take them a long time. Like, it's much harder to learn about something with a bunch of bad information around than if there's like no bad information. It's very quick and simple. You just go step by step through the whole thing and learn it very quickly. But if you hit a bad node of information, a bad piece of misinformation or disinformation, that can send you off on a different course, and you have to backtrack all the way back up to that point and be like, oh yeah, that was bad. And then you can start filtering and find good data, and then progress and progress and progress. So yeah, that is not so great. But Ethereum is also like, it has a lot of contributors in regards to who is building it. Like, if Vitalik were to die, it would be problematic because of the branding. If Vitalik were to be like, I don't know, get bad dementia or something and no longer be able to build Ethereum, initially there's going to be a huge shock, because people will panic, because we're used to centralized systems, and we see him as the head of a centralized system, and he's not. That's not actually how it works. There are a lot of contributors who made Ethereum happen. Vitalik was instrumental. He had a vision. He organized those people together. But I'm pretty sure he wants more contributors to be involved, and he wants to be less and less involved. And I think that is kind of what his behaviors suggest to me. Like, he is worrying about the benefit of humanity and the benefit of the network, and focusing on decentralization and making huge strides towards that. So I think, yeah, Ethereum has fallen off a little bit just because of the way things have shaken out. But I think they will likely become more decentralized through maybe the L2s, but those have huge centralization risks as well, because that's kind of how the L2s are working. You're having like a nice, you're making sacrifices in decentralization to have efficiency on the chain.
Yeah.
But enough L2s, and again, it's like time in is going to affect your risk factor. So if you're touching an L2 briefly and then you're off, and risk factor is mitigated. Whereas for like core underlying systems, like the L1s, as we call them now, like Ethereum, Bitcoin, BNB, Solana, etc., you park on there. You stay present on those networks, and they're more hardened, they're more decentralized, but they're not perfect. And the barriers to providing compute to these networks are becoming higher and higher and higher, which is negatively affecting decentralization across the board. But that is because we need to focus on user experience. So there's a trade-off. We need to make these networks faster and cheaper. That's achieved by essentially centralizing it, because there's just less compute requirements. There's less bad actor insulation necessary. So I think we're probably going to have like a really tough time in the crypto markets, where one of these networks may be compromised, but the economic burden to compromise one of these networks right now is like very high. But if we were to go through like 1932 style or 1930 style Great Depression, then that changes things, especially for proof of stake. It becomes very, very easy for a state actor to centralize and take over a network, which we can't rule out at all now that state actors are getting engaged and sovereign wealth funds are getting engaged. So I think we do want to probably preempt more of this problem. And yeah, Ethereum, yeah, give it like a 7. I think they're doing good. They got a lot of contributors. They have their foundation, their grant systems, which allow more and more people to engage. But their validator engagement, I think, is not as strong as it once was. Like for Bitcoin, again, you just plug in an ASIC and you're online. Problem is, it's an ASIC, which is not as accessible and provides barriers and all these other things. So it's bad, just slightly less bad. So
makes sense. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, Ethereum is doing well. Just definitely needs to kind of, in a sense, maybe make that transition back to like some of the old decentralization aspects that allowed it to have the massive growth that it did.
Yes.
Amazing. Okay, awesome.
Actually,
so that leads.
Other thing, real quick. Sorry, I realized I missed a very important element of like Ethereum's contribution to the decentralized situation. they solved the DNS problem through ENS. So
Mm.
that's a key building block towards addressing this user experience centralization problem we have with browsers and websites, and that being all kind of set up and integrated for centralized situations. Like, yeah, you have IPFS and you have Greenfield and all these other decentralized hosting solutions, but they're not as easy to integrate and set up. Like, at the end of the day, you still need to point to an IP address. But by having ENS, we have now a path to decentralized registrars or decentralized domain name service solutions. And there's like a lot of other chains that have copied this as well. Like Thorchain has also copied it. Thornames.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think recently, if I remember, I think Solana is also doing a naming system as well.
Yeah, I think more and more this is going to become a bigger and bigger deal. And like, be it like, I guess we can segue to the next token because I have a comment on another one as well.
Yeah, 100%. Next one on the list is the great Binance. On a scale of 1 to 10, how decentralized is BNB?
So BNB has it kind of went the opposite of Ethereum. Ethereum started super decentralized and became more centralized, and then BNB started pretty centralized and became more and more decentralized. Like one of my biggest critiques back in like 2020, I think it was 2020, because just after they had released their own EVM chain, because they started as just a token for their, initially it was a DEX, and then that ran into issues that it had become a centralized exchange, and because they were just too early, like the infrastructure in the market and the market's education awareness wasn't at a level to meet CZ's vision. So they pivoted and became the best solution in the space because they kept the ethos of decentralization, which you can see in everything that they do. They have a very, very decentralized approach to their organization. So like I mentioned earlier, like Google and these other entities do address their centralization problems through running decentralized teams. Like Binance practically rewrites the entire book on how to do that in a much more productive way compared to every other entity out there. And I think that's because they care about the ethos. Like their mantra is putting the user first and doing all these other things. So yeah, they started more centralized because that token came out for an exchange, which initially was going to be decentralized, and there were issues with where the market was at that time. So it became a centralized exchange in order to allow to prioritize users and provide the best opportunity for users and become the largest exchange and completely revolutionize the crypto exchange situation, which enabled the crypto market to grow. Because before that, like the exchanges were just normal TradFi kind of bullshit. They just take your money and run, which was not great because you could be early in Bitcoin. You could have bought in 2014, and then Mt. Gox is like, nope, you don't have any Bitcoin. You could be early, and then Bitfinex would be like, nope, you don't have any Bitcoin. So on and so forth. Quadriga, like there's FTX, like a lot of the TradFi wonkiness is infecting the crypto space because there's money to be made. Bad actors don't really give a crap about ideologies or philosophies or making the world a better place. They care about lining their own pockets. That's it. So Binance completely changed the game, and then they released their token, and it was for a exchange. It wasn't a blockchain. It was just an Ethereum token, and then an ERC20 token, and then they released their own blockchain. Essentially, they looked at Ethereum's future state, and they're like, well, why don't we just test that out for you guys? we'll just deploy it. And they did some tweaking to improve it and make it better, which, of course, provided feedback then for Ethereum because they're like, okay, these things worked well. These things did not work well. We can make these adjustments, which is fantastic. And I think the playoff of Ethereum and Binance was beautiful. And now Binance has essentially moved on to like Ethereum version 4.0, as Ethereum has just accepted Ethereum version 2.0 by integrating Greenfield and their own L2s and improving the ability for an individual to become a validator or a miner or a node or a server on that network. So I think Binance now is probably actually outperforming Ethereum, and I probably give it like a 7.5 on the decentralization scale. And it's just because of the relentless pursuit of doing a better job and being more and more decentralized. Uh, there is, I think, a common fallacy, which is that people think the Binance entity and the Binance chain are related, and they have the same origin point, but they're very, very different. Like
Hmm.
they share name and brand, which can it's can trick you, but they are very, very different. Like Binance is the centralized entity, which follows decentralized ethos and all these other things, and then the BNB chain is a decentralized blockchain. Um, and yeah, like my first critique years ago was, well, it's hard to become a validator. Like if I wanted to become a validator on the BNB chain, it was a nightmare. Like they didn't have clear documentation, they didn't have clear onboarding, they didn't have like a nice, easy process for someone to just become a validator. And still now, like they're more similar to Ethereum in that they have these barriers through the proof of stake mechanism. So it isn't perfect, but there's no other easy way to get that trade-off right now, which is why Ethereum had to do it too. Like you need to centralize things a little bit more to have a higher quality level of compute and network provisions. Like if you have me just adding a toaster onto the network and someone's block gets sent to that toaster, it's going to take them a long time to get verified or validated. And that block can fail. So they're going to have failed transactions, which is going to be problematic. Um,
Hmm.
but I think we need to actually address that as a problem as well in the space. Um, there are ways of addressing that and solving that problem. They just haven't been taken just yet. So yeah, I'd say BNB chain gets a 7.5. Yeah, because of Greenfield allowing for decentralized file storage, and even though it doesn't have like perfect decentralized compute, well, the smart contracts are the decentralized compute essentially, right?
Hmm.
Um, and a lot of web technologies are computed on the client side. So you download the files and you compute them in your browser. That gives you your experience. Um, it is viable, but it would be nice if they could integrate some elements similar to render, where there was more hardware compute access in a decentralized manner. And I think it would also do a lot towards decentralizing the system because some people might have a bunch of file storage, and some people might have a bunch of GPUs, and some people might have, I don't know, a quantum computer or whatever, right? If they can expand their blockchain to better address all these opportunities, I think they will become more and more decentralized, especially if you have like a simple validation mechanism. But that sounds easy when I say it like that, but it's not easy at all.
Yeah, simple, but definitely not easy.
Not easy at all. Yeah, simple to
Like,
somewhat comprehend. Uh,
yeah,
very
yeah,
hard to implement. Um, and then I think the
thousand
next
percent.
project was Solana.
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 Solana is next on the list. On a scale of 1 to 10, is it decentralized? Solana's blockchain.
Probably give them like a 4 to be honest. Um,
Eesh.
like
Four is
they're
ferocious.
there, but also when they first started, I was looking at setting up a validator node for them, and their barrier was huge. They also had like blacklisting and whitelisting, like Render's running blacklisting and whitelisting too. So you
Hmm.
can't just set up and start mining. Um, they may have changed that now. I'm so tempted to open up a tab and do research real quick and find out if they have changed because it's been years. Um, but still, by allowing the network to form without allowing decentralized participation, that does actually have a significant negative impact on your blockchain. I think this is also a large reason for why Solana saw such an outsized crash, because that
Hmm.
concentration risk essentially meant like a few very large holders could just sell out, and there goes like 90% of your token holders or 95% of your token holders. Um, and the ones producing are the majority token holders because they're the ones producing. Um,
Hmm.
they have very nice low fees. The fact that they're using Rust is fantastic. There's a lot of positive things to say about Solana. Like most importantly, like their best and worst features, their proof of history. Brilliant, great solution to handling blocks and having a more efficient blockchain. However, it also guarantees they're going to collapse in about a decade, a little less. Um, and I don't know if they're going to address that in time, or how complicated or difficult it's going to be for them to address that. It shouldn't be hard at all. It should be quite simple. But I mean, Y2K happened, and we came through it just fine. But a lot of stuff was lost. Like we didn't update everything, so
Hmm.
that's going to happen again. Unix time is going to run down again, and when it does, a proof of history system is going to be vulnerable to that. It's going to collapse. Uh, yeah. So while it's a great innovation and I love it, I think it's fantastic. I ain't gonna be holding any Solana or touching it after like 2030. Like we'll integrate the Solana blockchain because it's great. It works very well. It has a huge audience, a huge community. But yeah, it has fundamental issues that are
Hmm.
not even related to like decentralization or centralization. It's just technical issues. Like there's a risk vector that's embedded in there based on the crux of what makes them great that is going to cause a failure. Um, in regards to like building and contributing on the Solana blockchain, I think that's great as well. I don't know if it's as significant as BNB or Ethereum, but I think it's like it is way up there. Like the amount of independent developers who are building projects on Solana is huge right now, but that's mostly meme coins, so it's not actually real development. It's not actually productive development. It's just
Yeah, and a lot of the development is also coming through a lot of these kind of, I like to call them launch pads in a sense, like a pump fund. That's kind of like a launch pad for creating your own meme project. So it's like it's not, I don't want to sound savage, but it's not like real devs sitting
yes,
there actually programming. It's like there's a lot of very I like to call it a blockchain in a box or a layer two in a box. You pull it out and it's ready made for you. You just got to put in a little bit of soul,
a
right?
turnkey
So,
solution.
exactly. And so done for you, right? So
Yes,
it's like
yes,
with that in mind, it's like we're getting a lot of these projects that are created, but then at the same time, there's not as much innovation. The innovation curve is a little bit slow. There's a lot of wealth that's coming into the space for sure, though. For
one hundred
sure, for
percent.
sure. So it'll be from there. We'll kind of have to see, like you're saying, what Solana actually does. Are they able to take these funds and take the minds of the great engineers that they have and be able to put them on the task of being able to upgrade this proof of history system so that it can stand the test of time?
And I think they probably will like solve it because like one of the big issues when Y2K when we first had a Unix time issue was like we just didn't have many people who could computer like just even operate a computer. Like this was late the end of the 90s, right? We're the turn of the century. Most people just couldn't operate a computer. Like just what it was. Even technically inclined people were like not very technical at all. And then you had the other extreme where it's like some of these guys were just writing binary, like just straight up. uh, so you had a very small number of people who could even do anything to solve the problem. You had this huge growing corpus of technologies and data and software and whatnot, um, which was at risk. And thanks to the efforts of many thousands of people working tirelessly for, I think it was at least a year that those guys were crunching hard as shit and sacrificing their health and their sanity to save us from that collapse. They changed over enough stuff that we got through the Y2K and everyone just was like, oh, it didn't even matter, not a big deal at all. But that wasn't by accident. It's a lot of human effort went into that. But now we have AI agents, and they're making enough progress fast enough, especially with the open source stuff that's coming out, like through DeepSeek and a lot of these Chinese firms who are doing more to contribute to the benefit of humanity than Western firms at the moment, which is really unfortunate. Like Mistral did great. Out of like France had a great showing, um, but open source solutions from the West have been very lackluster, very disappointing. Especially considering we're supposed to be like all about democracy and all these ideals that line up with decentralization and open source stuff, and we're just not performing. Um,
Yeah, which is kind of a bad look given the fact that democracy is supposed to be something that leads to that, yet it seems like a lot of the places that are actually implementing these systems are communist.
yeah, we're supposedly communist, right? Like I think
Yeah.
China has like some zones which are more capitalist than America. Um, they're running because
Hmm.
every entity, every nation state entity is a split. Like none of them are just communist or just socialist or just capitalist. Uh, and like socialist and communist are same root ideology. They're very very similar. It's just socialism is watered down. It's less extreme and still carries the same underlying slavery ideology, but not to the same extreme. Um, yeah, I think China's production of these open source models is likely to come out of those capitalist zones because that's where people would be allowed to do these kinds of things. Um,
Hmm.
so hopefully we see more out of the West, but the West is becoming more socialist in a lot of ways. In some cases, like they're straight up communist ideas, um, which are sad, and disappointing. Like we just don't learn from history. And people have very strong opinions about things without actually looking into them and trying to become informed. But such is
Hmm.
life. Like I was a communist once. I read Das Kapital. I was like 14. I was like, yeah, communism's great. People do only live to work. That's our only purpose. Yes. And I read socialism. Like, yeah, you know what? We do actually deserve to own things too. Like I do deserve a home. Yeah, you're right. And the government should own everything and tell me what's up. And then became a capitalist at like 16 because I kept reading. And then I was like, oh, you know what? I do like the idea of having freedom. I do think slavery is bad. I do think I deserve to be able to feed myself and give myself water and provide for my own needs and not be told what I can and can't do by power that doesn't even care that I exist and only knows me as a line item number. I think that is problematic. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's an evolution. Different people grow and learn at different rates, and realistically, that capitalism isn't perfect either. There are issues with the capitalist process as well, or at least its implementation. Um, but during those brief moments where we do have predominant capitalist processes, we do very, very well. And decentralization is like the new buzzword essentially for capitalism and democracy. All the same root ideology. It's all the same root philosophy. Uh, give the
Wow,
people the power.
that's a beautiful thing to actually highlight because definitely, um, yeah, in such a society that we live right now, where everybody is, I feel like a lot of people's consciousness, their mind, their frequency is focused on yes, freedom. How can we have freedom? You notice more people are starting to do remote work. More people are starting to look for opportunities to grow their own business online, to do these things because they want to have the liberty to be able to choose things for themselves. And so decentralization, yeah, falls right into that category. And as you were saying before, it's constantly a moving target. As we continue to develop, as we continue to expand these ideas, we're going to have a better understanding of exactly what is decentralization as well as what is capitalistic in a way that's fair and has a free market that allows people to be able to operate and thrive within that space.
100%. And I think like they're all based on like philosophies on how people want to live too. And I think like a big issue that I used to have, which I think I'm mostly over, is I used to think like, oh, we should have everything as like capitalist and decentralized and democracy. But that's based on a life philosophy that people work to live. Like the only reason I do work is so I can provide a better life for myself and those around me. I want to produce enough excess to give it away. Um, that is uh, a bias, right? Some people
Mm,
don't want that. Like some people want to be told like what to do and how to do it and when they can do things. Like that is how some people are. Like there's no one life philosophy for everybody. We're all different.
mm,
People can ascribe to different life philosophies. It just so happens that these two life philosophies are the big ones that people have been fighting over for centuries. Um, like communist socialist ideology is from the philosophy of people live to work, get joy out of creating a chair, even if no one's going to use it or sit in it. That is your purpose in life. You build chairs. That's your thing. And then you have capitalists being like, no, I like exploring and discovering and creating and like I enjoy art and all these other things, and I want to just create and I want to explore and adventure and all these other things. Like I work to live because I have needs, and those around me have needs, and I will
mm.
produce as much as I can with as little as I can to benefit the most that I can. And in a capitalist system, you orientate around allowing those people to produce as much as they can, so you have excess and surplus of everything. And then in a communist system, you throw them in a fucking gulag. In a socialist system, you make sure that they are limited in what they're allowed to do, and you're putting guiders and blockers on them, and you're guiding them as the government would like you to act and do. So like the West is definitely socialist at this point, based on just counting the policies. America, which is supposed to be this bastion of capitalism, really isn't. If you actually count the policies and you look at what's going on, it's a very controversial statement, I'm well aware, but the truth is the truth. So,
Mhm.
uh,
Yeah, I mean, hey, it is what it is. At the end of the day, it's kind of like us saying, Solana is a four on decentralization. It could be
yeah,
controversial for some people. They might look at it as like this beacon, but at the end of the day, the information is the information, right? We're looking at it based on the criteria and the actual ideologies that these things follow, and if their policies and if their systems are actually in alignment with that. That's just it. That's going to allow people to be able to make the decisions that they need to make for themselves. Whatever system benefits you, hey, more power to you. Get involved in that, double down, become a validator, or in a sense, from a political standpoint, become a supporter
yeah,
of this, and then push that forward.
100%. I think like everything is contributing value at the end of the day. Like I don't think the vast majority of people are going like, oh yeah, I'm going to create a super centralized blockchain just so I can fuck everybody over. Enbridge.
Mm.
But uh, no, most, like I'd say like 80+% of people are trying to do the best that they can to make the world a better place. Unfortunately, we have a lot of disinformation and we've destroyed our education system. And so a lot of us have been told what to think and not how to think. And that is super problematic. But
Mm.
we will come right. Like the intentions of most people are good, even if their energies and actions and behaviors are well intentioned and very bad. I think like Solana, for instance, huge breakthroughs. Like, and I think their intentions are totally good, and I think their logic and processes are totally good. I don't think they buy into fallacies. I think they're solid as shit. But I haven't seen anything yet to tell me that they are aware of their upcoming issue and the underlying risk vector, the proof of history. I would hope, I presume that there are some at the top who do know. Like some of the founders or some of the key developers and contributors probably do know. But maybe they don't have a solution to it yet. Or maybe they just don't want to spook people. Like you can have a solution to a problem. And like something I'm very guilty of is like I can see a problem way off in 10 years or 100 years or something. And I'm like, we have to implement this solution that's really hard right now. Like in today's perspectives, very, very hard to do. But in 5 years, it should be not too challenging. So I bring up the
Mm.
problem today, at day zero, and then everyone freaks out about this problem that's coming up in a century, even though we can solve it in 10 years, no problem. So you need to manage that stuff too. You need to be reasonable with people. And again, like most people exist and live on a week to week basis. That's their entire life
Mm.
perspective. And then you have like a smaller number of people who look at a month to month basis, and a smaller number year to year. And then a very small percentage of people who are looking beyond year to year. Um, and like we can only deal with today anyway. So looking too far ahead is kind of a silly thing to do in many regards, but some of
Yeah,
us can't
yeah, it
help ourselves.
removes you from living in the present.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. But it's also,
Mhm.
I think, there is a place for it as well. It is beneficial to look and look at like large system complications over a long spans of time because it provides for better planning. You can avoid a bunch of issues. Like maybe Solana could have figured out a better solution than proof of history if they were dealing with that issue. But maybe they couldn't have launched in time. Maybe they would have run out of capital, or maybe they wouldn't be able to gain as much support. Like there's all these other things, right? And the contribution of Solana to the system is tremendous and beneficial and should not be watered down. But at the end of the day, they need to improve their decentralization processes more. Like they're not
Mm.
like really bad. Like there was this one project which was fully centralized. I remember it came out and it was fighting with Caspa because Caspa is decentralized and like a great innovation in the space. And I'd probably rank them a little bit above Solana right now. They're probably like a 5 or 5.5 in decentralization terms. Um, they were a little bit higher, but then A6 came out again, and that reduce their score because you get a concentration risk baked into the provider of the hardware being just a limited single point. Um,
Mm.
but there was another one that had a very similar ticker to cast. That was, what was it? KRA instead of KA. But they were essentially by JP Morgan, and they were hating on the
Mm.
Casper community really, really hard. Um, and they were a centralized blockchain, and they didn't even see the irony of what they were doing. Like because people just don't know, right? They read a marketing material item, and that becomes their entire opinion. And to hell with facts and figures.
Yeah. And this is why we say to all you guys, read the white paper.
Yeah, read the white paper, please. Read
Because
this stuff.
it is
Find
very
problems.
important. It will give you the actual understanding of what the people's mindset behind the project is, what they're actually going to build, and just everything from the distributions and all of that. So, guys, when we tell you do your own research on a project, that doesn't mean go look at one, two article. That doesn't start with the white paper. That is the ethos. That is the whole systems and mechanisms that make it what it is. Once you go from there, even if you don't fully understand it, the seed has been planted. And then it allows you to be able to go forward. And as you learn more information, it waters that plant.
100% bless. Yes, I agree entirely. And like, also, like, I feel like this is a good time to note, like, we would probably get like a 1 on the decentralization score right now. Like, we're getting there.
Mm,
We're building. We went from 0 to 1. Great. We have a token. We exist. Um,
mm,
we have more and more contributors, but we still only have a few, like a couple dozen people or something like this, right? Um, we're not over 100 contributors. We're not over 1,000. And then we're not running our own blockchain. Our solution to that problem is pretty good, I think, by plugging into all blockchains and having tokens and system operations on all blockchains. If one were to fail, through insurance mechanisms built into the underlying protocol, no one loses anything, and the other blockchains are still in existence, so everybody's okay. We can still operate.
mm,
We run an increasingly decentralized thesis. So as we build out more and more and more, we become more and more decentralized. And most critically, we're competing against Circle and Tether, who are scoring zeros in decentralization. They are from a centralized entity. They have no decentralization whatsoever, and their transparency benefits are lackluster at best. Um, so I think against relative peers, we are very, very decentralized. And we're the first ones really pushing to fix this problem, or not the first ones. DAI did try to fix this in a decentralized manner, but there are limits to their implementation methodology, which they will never be able to overcome or surpass, unfortunately. They're an essential part of the ecosystem that'll never go away in my mind and will be worth
mm,
an increasing amount of value. But there are just fundamental limits on the implementation that they have selected. Uh, and therefore, we will surpass them very quickly. And I think we'll surpass Tether and Circle as well if people just know we exist and we can just get more contributors and we can actually stick to our objectives and stick to our ethos. Because, like, right now, if I were to die, I don't think much would be getting done on the protocol. That's a concentration risk. That is substantial and not good. Um, it needs to be a situation where, like, I don't matter at all. That would then score us higher on a decentralization score there. Um, we want to see like better decentralization one day, maybe through having our own blockchain. So we have our own validators as well. And there's probably a good opportunity in an implementation similar to Cosmos or Thorchain, which I think initially did use Cosmos, might still actually use Cosmos. Um, so we're getting there. And the unfortunate reality is like fiat is centralized by its nature. Like that is a feature, not anything else. Like that is how fiat is intended to work and must work. Um, all we're doing is we're making it a little bit safer and more decentralized, and we're addressing the underlying risks of a CBDC, which is so hyper centralized, it makes fiat non-viable, and it will collapse nation states if they implement it based on the current implementation models of CBDCs. So let's give a solution to the populations and the governments that allows them to hedge themselves so that if and or when, more so probably when they implement CBDCs, instead of having nation states collapsing, there will be some members inside of those nation states who are using tokenized fiats and cryptos and other things to then stabilize that collapse and then rebuild their nation states. Because yeah, CBDCs are definitely going to destroy many countries. So hopefully we don't see too many people pushing down that path. Like Enbridge, I'm still so mad that they're calling themselves decentralized when it's like they have a centralized server. Like, we're a blockchain. No,
Yeah.
you're not. You're
Yeah,
dishonest.
and I mean that's the beauty of like us doing this segment and just sharing that knowledge, because now people can actually have something to measure things by. When they see a project, it's like, okay, let me take a look at their white paper. And it's like once you look at certain things or look at certain features and aspects, it's like, they claim to be decentralized, but according to the pathway that they're actually going, it's going to be much more centralized. Like even for us, like you were saying, currently we're at a one. But if you take a look at our roadmap and you take a look at the ethos of what we are actually building, you can see that this is something that could, in the future, get to a Bitcoin level of 8.5 or even take it further than that as the target continues to move forward.
Correct. I think we in our white paper we do actually paint a path to probably like a 9.5 in decentralization, 9 to 9.5, because we implement on all blockchains. We have a huge decentralized base of contributors. We have a huge decentralized base of entities and structures. We have a decentralized front end in our roadmap. We have our back end is decentralized already. As we continue to build, as long as the contributors are all in alignment with the ethos of the white paper and of the project, we should become more decentralized than a lot of the most decentralized DOMs. Like, we'll always have a limiting factor of fiat, but there are actually solutions to that as well. Like, I think it was Peter Thiel, if I'm not mistaken, who backed or created a project that creates like a reserve of reserves. I think their symbol is like RSV or something. But their thesis was essentially by aggregating all of the individual fiats to derive a super fiat. That is in essence actually a decentralizing force, which allows a fiat to become decentralized. So there are ways of doing this. And like another mechanism is just like the backing of that fiat. So if we're just using government debt, which is our initial thesis because it's simple and it works and it helps governments out right now because they need people to buy their debt because they're overspending. And you know they're always going to pay their debts unless the country collapses. So if you're holding fiat in a bank account, you have the same risk vector. If you have cash in your pocket, you have the same risk vector as a tokenized fiat. It's just the tokenized fiat has higher yield and a reduced risk vector in many instances. So I think if we can keep building, and our entire ethos and intent is to just like stabilize, like to empower different nation states to have better fiat, and to arm good actors inside nation states with better fiat, and to arm the population in different nation states with better fiat, and we solve this problem, which has gone unsolved now for over a decade, that is going to be valuable to people. And through a decentralized system, which runs entirely through a contributor process, we're also not concentrating wealth into the hands of the few, because any single person can just post up and be like, hey, protocol, there's a problem. And then they essentially that creates a request for proposal or a bounty opportunity or a work item. And then we vote on like, yes, that's a valid work item. We do need to solve that as a community, right? People just reading. And of course, if you don't understand it, you might read it and be like, I don't understand it. I'm not going to vote. That's simple, you know? And right now in society, like most of us don't vote a lot of the time on most things because we're too busy with life, you know? But as we automate more and more and more, this process of becoming informed and voting on things and making decisions is going to become more and more valuable, because where we spend our resources, how we spend our resources, is already become one of the most economically important factors in society, and it's going to continue to become more and more important because, well, with more and more automation and more resource acquisition, uh, the efficient use of those resources is now the primary factor of uh, value creation. So, yeah, I think we are at a one. We have probably a path to a nine. And as we expand and we build out more and we get more perspectives and we get more contributors and we get more users and we build more value, that should continue to accelerate. Like, yeah, the 10 definition is going to move and then we'll become a 7 or something, or 6 or 5. Uh,
Mm.
but I think for the next little while at least, I think we should go from like a 1 to a 2. And then after that, we should go from a 2 to maybe a 3, and so on and so forth. Like, until we break probably a 5. And then after that point, we might see a little bit of a lag in our decentralization factor because the goalpost of decentralization is going to be probably moving at the same rate that we are decentralizing, or maybe even a little bit faster. So we might move forward, but
Mm.
this thing's moving forward so much faster. um,
Mm.
so we might get stuck around there for a little bit, but hard to say, hard to know the future for certain. The interest in decentralization in the space has become nothing more than a buzzword. The actual underlying ethos and belief and performances of decentralization have been lackluster. Um, and that's just because, we're all simple, dumb little naked apes. We're doing the best that we can and we're struggling to survive, and being educated and all this stuff is cool, but not necessarily available to most people. And then even if you are aware, at the end of the day, you got bills to pay, so you're going to prioritize whatever's going to make you the most amount of money the fastest. And decentralization is not always that. Like, there are centralized things which can make a lot of money very, very quickly, seemingly at least. The flip side of that, like meme coins are a great example, for a very, 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 very few select people who essentially sell at the top and buy at the bottom. And if you're buying not at the bottom and you're selling not at the top, you're getting nothing. You're losing everything. It is a casino. Very
Mm.
few meme coins actually have any underlying value whatsoever. Dogecoin accidentally discovered value, and that's just because they inflate slower than fiat. And they're more mechanical and reliable, and they're building other functions and utilities. So, um, still, utility is utility. Like, they've broken beyond.
Mm.
The primary utility of meme coins, from what I can see so far, is like the utility of hope. It's the only way a lot of people see themselves being able to afford a house, um, or to escape the rat race. So it is a lottery utility, a lottery that's more fair than traditional lotteries. So
Yeah,
in
yeah,
that
because
framing and
usually,
landscape, it makes sense to me. I see why people are doing it.
yeah, at least with meme coins, it's more like PvP instead of the house being against you, and the house always wins.
Correct. Exactly. In that landscape, it makes a lot of, like, people that go to casinos, people buy lottery tickets, people like betting, and yeah, meme coins are a much more fair PvP environment, where the odds aren't as stacked against you. But still, if you go into fundamental things where there is growth and there is benefit and value creation, there are utilities, it might take longer, but your probability of win is much, 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 much higher. Like, I'm going to use our project as an example because obviously I'm biased. Um, so if we have a project value of, let's say, $100 million, uh, and then we produce $10 billion of value, so we pay out $10 billion to contributors and to users and to people, and entities and governments and all these other things. Um, it's likely that our token price is no longer going to be what it was. Like, it's probably going to be uh, valued higher. Uh, Probably not at $10 billion of total market cap, but maybe something like 5 or 2 or 3. Like, I think it would be greater than the production because all other
Mm.
assets. are valued at a higher rate than their annual production level because people value on like a calculation on the time value of money and the present value of it and the future value of it and that cash flow benefit. So, or that value flowing benefit, that yield benefit. So it's likely to be a multiple. Like people will be like, okay, it takes me, like, I'm willing to hold this for 3 years for growth. So therefore,
Mm.
I'm willing to value it at 3 years of payouts on growth. That's my buy price. Or maybe 5 years, or 10 years, or 20 years, or 30 years, whatever people so deem. I have no idea. Um, so I think, yeah, that's a safer play because if you're producing, then you're in a better position. Additionally, when you're throwing into like meme coins, you have a $0 outcome as your risk downside. When you're doing something that actually produces, well, it's whatever the production is for however long you're engaged. So if it produces $10, that's the downside, you know? If it produces
Mm.
$100, that's your downside. And that goes up forever in theory, as long as you're actually continuously building and growing. Um, there will be an upper bound eventually in the future if fiat stops inflating, but I don't think fiat can stop inflating. It's necessary for economics to kind of have that rebasing, because otherwise everyone just hoards their money. So they kind of need to do inflating, and it allows governments to do things that they kind of need to do. So inflation is actually kind of a feature of fiat, not a bug. Um, it's probably also the only way to actually implement UBI. And there's no good UBI implementations that are being publicly shared yet either, which is very, very sad. But the solution to it is
Mm.
literally just like every new dollar printed can only be distributed equally to the citizenry. That's it. UBI fixed, inflation fixed, because now you're flipping the entire economic system on its head and you're making it capitalist again by putting all the money into the hands of the people and they choose where to give their money. So
Yeah, exactly.
it,
Exactly. And for those who do not know or are not aware, UBI simply stands for Universal Basic Income. This is essentially just a certain amount of money that would be distributed to people that allows them to take care of their basic needs, let's say rent, groceries, car, etc.
yeah, and it's gaining more attention at the moment because the reality of human labor being worthless is slowly being realized by more and more people. I don't think it'll ever be completely worthless. Like there's always going to be things for people to do. It's just going to change. Like for instance, there are going to be some people who are like, no, I don't want my food to be cooked by a robot or served to me by a robot. I don't want my therapist to be a robot. I don't want my salesperson to be a robot. I don't want my whatever, insert blank to be a robot. There's going to be a human bias forever because humans like humans.
Mm.
That's to be what we're like. That's just what it is. Like, I'm personally biased towards robots. I much prefer talking to a robot about my problems than a human, or getting my
Mm.
food from a robot who's not going to spit in my food
Yeah.
or do anything else weird. Humans are super weird, man. I'd rather take that the robot process in most instances. But there are some people who are not that way at all, who will never choose the robot instance, or who would much prefer humans in almost all instances. Um, so I think, yeah, UBI is going to become a thing. It has to be. But if we don't implement that properly, just like CBDCs, that's a big problem. It's a very, very big problem. If you implement UBI incorrectly, you're going to create runaway inflation and you're going to create a bigger wealth disparity. Um,
Mm.
and you're also just going to piss people off. That's just not a good way to do it. Like you can literally eliminate all nation state taxes and have higher nation state budget by running a smart UBI system. Like the government could just take 10% off the top of UBI distributions and keep its transactional taxes. And that way it's got these two really strong rods of measuring what's going on in the economy without stopping people from getting ahead. Like, pretty sure when income tax was first implemented, you could buy a house before paying any tax. You could
Mm.
do all these things before you actually had any tax burden. And I think they were also supposed to be temporary measures as well. So, um, yeah, I think there's a lot of big shifts that have to happen in the world, and this is one small area where we can help things along a little bit because we need decentralization. We need some way of dealing with UBI that's not a CBDC, because the risk vectors associated to that are just too big to stomach for any good actors in any nation states. Um, and yeah, we can hopefully fix some of these things, and hopefully we can be contributors to good solutions that help humanity and move us forward. And hopefully we can be a good template for the common good protocol thesis. And hopefully we can see other people move along into that thesis. Because like also the common good protocol thesis is not new. Like there are people who've been thinking about that stuff for like a century. Just like blockchains and decentralized technologies and all these things, like none of it's new. It's been around for many, 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 many years. Which is that Bitcoin didn't exist until like 2008 or 9 or whatever, right?
Hmm.
So I think if we can contribute and make things a little bit better in this one thing and fix this serious problem, which is like if you're moving from a fiat to crypto or from crypto to fiat, whole system sucks right now. It's not good. Additionally, when it comes to like international trade, if you are moving from fiat A to fiat B, that stuff is a nightmare right now, and there's a whole bunch of problems in that. And then if you're just doing trade, like inside a country, like a really cool example is like I was told about how oil pipelines work, and I was shocked because I found out that, or I was told that oil stops sometimes. So you have a pipeline that can have a certain level of throughput and productivity, and this could be for water or oil or anything else you can put in a pipeline, right? If it needs to change owners and there's the exchange of consideration hasn't occurred, so the person hasn't bought the thing from this person, so this person hasn't sent the money, so this person doesn't release the item into their care, into their possession, oil. They don't just sit and wait, and you have stuff sitting and waiting at docks while people are waiting to settle. Whereas if you actually have tokenized fiat and you have smart contracts, as soon as the container ship or the product or the item arrives at a certain point, and you scan it in and you verify it and you put that shit on chain through an oracle, bada bing, bada boom, smart contract execution, it moves. That whole process is now just block time instead of bank time, which is now,
Yeah, and we know bank time is cooked.
it's completely cooked, and it's so fraudulent because unfortunately, humans are humans. Banks have a lot of employees. They can hire bad actors, and they might actually attract a lot of bad actors. So we need to kind of get around this problem, and I think good actors inside the banking system know this, and good actors inside nation states know this, and there are a lot of good actors who are aware of these problems, maybe not completely, and they probably have an idea of what the solutions are. They just don't necessarily all know that we exist yet. Some of them do, but not necessarily enough. So we need to get more awareness, and we need to just keep growing, I guess. Keep building.
1,000%.
Yeah.
Keep building, keep bringing more people, and keep creating more conversations like this to help expand people's consciousness and bring more people that are like-minded into this space.
100%. I agree.
Yeah, awesome, awesome. Well, yeah, I think that kind of overarches everything that we kind of wanted to go through for this amazing episode of Is It Decentralized? I love how we got the opportunity to kind of break everything down and then also talk about different projects as well as talk about our own project, FiatRexa, and kind of